is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. In our last video, we took the super cheap turbo Civic out and we started upping the boost until we ran into an issue with our fuel injectors. So these injectors I found on Facebook Marketplace quite a while back when we still had a stock engine and a little T04E turbo on this thing, and they were $50, they were 550cc, and I had no data for them whatsoever. I don't even know what brand they are. So I had to guess from the drop down menu in the Honda S300 and just go with a generic set of dead times. And when we had that stock stuff, it worked all right, and we got this thing running and driving decent enough for what we needed. But once we started leaning on this thing in the last video and trying to go above 20 pounds of boost, we really started to see our issues. So thank you to a couple subscribers. We're going to be addressing that today. We have a set of 1000cc and 1500cc injectors from a couple subscribers that are basically brand new Hunter tuned. So I'm super excited to try those things out. I'm kind of leaning to the 1500 so that we have room for E85 in the near future. But whichever ones we don't use today will be going on the shelf nice and sealed up and be used on an upcoming project. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But let's get through the intro. We'll pull the laptop out, get these injectors swapped out, make some changes, try to get this thing to fire up, and hopefully even take it for a ride. So let's get through the intro and jump right into today's video. Now that we've gotten through the intro, I want to give a quick rundown on our current fuel system, just in case you guys didn't see those videos. Now, if you want to see more on the fuel system or any other part of this build, make sure to go back on the Honda playlist. We have covered everything that we've done to this car since the day we picked it up, so make sure to go back and check that out. But our current fuel system is a Walbro 450 liter per hour pump that we have in the tank. It then goes to a full ievilenergy fuel system. We decided to go with their 6AN PTFE line that comes up to one of their fuel filters, then to an AEM fuel rail, which then comes out and goes to our 1-to-1 boost referenced ievilenergy fuel pressure regulator. And then from there, it is another 6AN PTFE line that returns it back to the tank. So like I said, I think our bottleneck in our fuel system has been these cheap $50 550cc injectors, but we're gonna go ahead and change that today. Thank you to a couple subscribers. So let's go ahead, pick the injectors we're gonna use, open them up, and then we'll start swapping them out on the super cheap turbo Civic. Like I said, we had two people send some in. We had some thousands and then we had some 1500s. These are the 1500s. I think that's what we're gonna go with so that we have plenty of headroom when we put this thing on E85 and flex fuel, which is coming up in the very near future. And then I think the thousands will be absolutely perfect for a pump gas setup. We're even going to be keeping these little 550s for a stock engine, just slap some boost at it kind of setup. I think they're going to work perfectly fine for that. Now, the best part of both of our new sets of injectors is they did come with all of the injector data, all the dead times, latency, all of that stuff. So that is a huge bonus, but I'm super excited to get these things swapped in there and see what we can do with them. So like I said, they are Hunter tuned. I'm curious to see how these things work. I've been wanting to try some of his stuff for quite some time now, so super pumped that we get to try it out today. So let's get the 550s pulled out and get the 1500 slapped in. So before we get started, I wanted to give you guys a quick look at our current setup. As you can see, we are running our AEM fuel rail. Now the first thing that we're going to take off is this 10AN breather line to give us a little bit more room to work with on getting the injectors and fuel rail pulled off of here. Once we get that pulled off, I am going to disconnect our return line so that we don't spray fuel everywhere when we take our injector out. Now, as you can see down in here for the fuel rail standoff, I did have to make a little custom bracket to stand this thing up a little bit taller because the current injectors are taller, and with the Y8 manifold, the stock standoffs weren't quite long enough to reach. So let's get the fuel line return off, and then we can go ahead and start swapping out these injectors. Let's go ahead and get this breather disconnected, start unplugging these things. Alright, let's go ahead and break this line free. We'll drain what we can into a cup, try to catch it, and then we can start breaking loose the fuel rail itself. Wow, I'm actually surprised, not much. Didn't get much out of it. I honestly thought we were gonna get more than that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start undoing the bolts that hold it to the little standoffs that hold the rail. and then we should be able to tilt that right up out of our way. All right, got that one. Now this rail should pop right off of there. So let's go ahead and get these pulled out of the fuel rail itself, and then we'll get our new injector swapped on, clean this stuff up, and get it back together. I'm gonna try to leave the little top hats in the fuel rail so that we don't have to mess with those O-rings, and we'll just have to mess with the injectors themselves, because you need the little adapters to run them in this rail. So we had to run those. See if you can't leave that. Yep, perfect. All right, so we got that out, and we're gonna leave these little cups or the top hats right on the rail. So I'm gonna go set this one on the bench, and we'll do the same thing right down the line. So like I was showing you guys before, our little standoffs that we had to make, you can see down in here what they actually look like. It's just like a nut coupler type deal, so we could thread into it. So we're gonna go ahead and start installing these new injectors. I'm gonna try to get them in the little top hats first. I put some Vaseline on there. Don't forget, always gotta use your lube. I don't want to rip the injector, and with a little bit of Vaseline, you don't want to go crazy, you don't want to gum it up in there so that it gets in the injector when you fire this thing up, but I do use just a little bit around the O-ring itself to help slide it in there. So I'm going to jump around here for just a second, because you guys are going to see these in some clips of the video and then not in other clips, and that's because we had a second subscriber send another care package, which I am extremely grateful for and I really appreciate, and it came in after we had already gotten our 1500cc injectors installed. So I wanted to use some of it today, so we went back through and installed them. But at this point in the video is when you would want to install them, so I figured I'd throw it in here for you guys to check out. So as you guys can see, not only did he send us a set of 1000cc injectors, but he also sent us the direct wired pigtail so we can splice these right in, and then even threw in a set of grommets for the lower intake manifold for our injectors to slide right in. So I'm super grateful. I don't know if he wants to be shouted out by name or by username, so I'm going to hold back from doing that for now, but he knows who he is, and I am extremely grateful for these. So I am going to keep trying to use the 1500s that we have in the car that were already sent in before, but if I can't get those to work, we'll definitely throw these 1000s in, and even if we don't use them on the Civic, I'm going to be using these for an upcoming project, so really appreciate it. These we are going to go ahead and try to throw in the little grommet adapters. It might help out with a little bit of a vacuum leak down at the grommets the way we have them set up, and then these pigtails we will once again definitely be using on the Turbo Civic and get this thing wired up the proper way. So I've started installing the little Hunter tuned grommet adapters at the bottom there, these little guys here, and I have to say, if you guys are going to do this, I'd recommend doing it with the intake manifold still off the car if it's something you're building. But if the intake manifold is not coming off, they're kind of challenging to get in there. So what I found has been working for me is I took this socket right here, and it fits perfectly over the little grommet adapter, and I have a 3/8 extension on it, and if I push down about as hard as I can kind of get them to slide in. But then I've been taking this little dead blow hammer and just tapping it a little bit, and they finally bottom out. So be very careful not to rip the O-ring. I've been using a bunch of Vaseline on the O-ring and the opening there, the receiver groove. So they're kind of a challenge to get in there, but they will go. You just got to take some time with them and try to get them tapped in there. So I've got these two in, I got those two left to do. So let's go ahead and finish this thing up so we can try to start it again. Putting a little bit of Vaseline in here to help not rip the O-ring. And then I've got some Vaseline on the O-ring of the little grommet adapter right here. We're gonna go ahead and set this guy in place. Just like so. And then, probably hard for you guys to see, but then I just take the little socket that I'm using, push it down, and then tap it. Make sure it's bottomed out, and we're good to go. Now we got to put some more Vaseline on these O-rings and try to slide them down in there and bolt this rail back down. Another thing I just ran into, if you're going to run this combo, is you can't use the standoffs that I went and found the other day and used. I'm going to have to use the custom ones that we already had in here that I took off to run with the stock grommets. With the Hunter Tune lower grommets, it bumps the rail up a little bit because they're a little taller, so I'm gonna have to use this custom one I made. I'm sure that there's a factory one that will work, I just don't have one, so this is what we're gonna use for now. Not ideal, but I think it's gonna work, so let's go ahead and give that a shot. So let's go ahead and throw the nuts on there, get this thing tightened down, and then we can start plugging everything in, hooking our fuel line back up, and get ready to do the tuning side of things. So we've gotten this thing buttoned up with the new injectors and the injector grommets. Now it's time to mess around with the tune and see if we can't get this thing to run. Before I put the crankcase vent line on, we're just gonna hit the key a couple times to make sure we don't have any fuel leaks. All right, I'm gonna throw the breather line back on, and then we can grab the laptop and start messing with the tune and see if we can't get this thing to run. So as you can see, we've got our laptop out, and the plan now is I'm gonna go ahead and save this file as our last 550cc injector file. I just like to do safety saves, so if we have any issues or corruption, at least we have a good base to come back to. We knew it run on this with the other injectors. So let's go ahead and save this. I already made some files for 550cc versus 1500cc. So we're gonna go to plug this thing in real quick, and then I'm just going to download the file we have in there. So now that we've got a safety save out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and start inputting some data for our new injectors. But before we do, just for giggles, I wanna ask ChatGPT what it thinks we should do. So I've got, what all do I need to change in my tune on Honda S300 V3 to go from 550cc injectors to 1500cc injectors? Let's see what it has to say. It's actually giving us quite a bit of information here, so I'll screenshot it and try to put it up on your guys' screen a little bit clearer. So these are the screenshots from ChatGPT. It was definitely helpful, but keep in mind that ChatGPT can't fully go through and tell you exactly what you need to do, but if you have questions, it is definitely very helpful to point you in the right direction. And I actually found it quite useful for some different aspects here while we were going along trying to get this thing dialed in. All right, guys, so I wanted to use a little bit of ChatGPT to help us tune this thing. So first thing, obviously, it wants us to do is input all of our dead times and latency data. So we've got the little sheet here. I just screenshotted it so I could print it off, make it a little bit easier for us to see. But this is what comes with the Hunter tuned injectors. And as you guys can see down here, we have all of our voltage dead times. And these injectors flow 1500 cc's at 43.5 pounds of fuel pressure. So we should be good to go as far as all of that is concerned. So let's go ahead and get started here. So first thing we're gonna have to do is go into our parameters, and then we can go to fuel injectors. And now I'm gonna go through and get all of this stuff entered in real quick. So for current injector size, I'm gonna go ahead and change that to 1500. And then we can go down here to the voltage compensation, and we have our chart here. Now on our chart, it doesn't say what 0.00 volts is, but we do have 8. So we're gonna go over to 8 volts and we'll start there. All right, so we've got our dead times entered and we've got our flow rate entered. So now we can move on to what we're gonna do next. So now that we've got that data in there, we're gonna go ahead and rock with ChatGPT and see what happens here. So the next thing it wants us to do is go ahead and rescale our transient and start up fueling. So we're gonna go to fuel trims here. Now our second box down here is cranking fuel trim. We're at 30% now, and it wants us to multiply that by 0.366. So if we take the 30%, multiply it by 0.366, that gives us 11%. So we're gonna bump that all the way down to 11. Makes sense though, because the 1500s are gonna flow a lot more fuel, so we don't need as high as a percentage to get this thing to start up. So we're gonna start out there. We can do post-start fuel, throttle tip-in, and then overall fuel trim, it wants us to leave at 0 for now. So let's see what we've got here. Throttle tip-in trim, I have at 0%. So let's ask it. Let's go ahead and ask it. So apparently I shouldn't have had that at 0, but it's gonna go ahead and help us out here. So it wants us to, it says what to set tip-in fuel trim 60% to 65 as a safe starting point. Then do a few quick throttle blips in open loop, watch the wideband. If AFR still dips rich, pull more, go closer to 70%. Let's go ahead and put negative 60 in there and see what it does. I've actually never really messed with many of these tables before, and like I've said in all my other videos, I am by no means a tuner, so don't follow what I'm saying as the gospel. I'm learning as I go here, and we're using ChatGPT to help us, so let's see what this thing can do. If this thing can get our car running, I'll be extremely happy, because once we get this thing running, I can work on the fuel map. So let's go ahead and put negative 60% in there, and now on to the next thing it wants us to touch. So we've got our post-start fuel adjustment at 0% right now. It wants us to adjust that, so I again asked ChatGPT, my post-start fuel adjustment is at 0%, what should I change that to? Let's see what it says. Pretty good information right there. I'll go ahead and screenshot it for you guys. So it wants us to change it to negative 55%. Now that we've got this stuff set up, basically how ChatGPT wants us to set it up using our dead times and its calculation for everything else, I think we're finally ready to start this thing and see what it does, and then we'll have to make adjustments from there. But what I'm gonna do next is I'm just gonna go ahead and save this file just in case we lose it when we plug in. Now let's go ahead, hop in the car. I'm gonna hit the key and see if this thing starts. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and write this file, and let's go ahead and start this thing up and see what it does. Keep in mind, it's pretty cool out tonight. It says 63, but it feels a little bit cooler than that. But we're gonna go ahead and fire this thing up, see if it even runs for us, and we'll make adjustments as needed. Holy crap, guys, it actually fired right up. I'm not even gonna lie and tell you guys that I'm not a little shocked. It says it's super fat. It's saying 10.1, 10.0. So I'm gonna go in here and make some adjustments, and we'll go from there with it. And it's still idling wicked fat. I think this whole table is gonna have to come down a bit because we didn't have the right dead times for our old injectors. So I'm gonna go in here just at idle for a second, and we're gonna try to take out quite a bit of percentage and just see what it does. Get it to idle pretty smooth at about 11.8 to 12.0 AFR, but anytime I start going leaner than that, this thing just wants to start missing, and it sounds kind of choppy and just, to me, doesn't sound good. So not sure if we have something else going on, but it's idling at 12.0 pretty comfortably. Doesn't sound the best or the smoothest, but it's idling. So not 100% sure what we should do next here. Like I said, I am by no means a tuner, and I can reach out to a couple people and ask some questions, but I'm just not 100% sure where to go from here. All right, guys, so it is the next day, and I want to check a couple things because as you seen last night, surprisingly, this thing actually started up and ran pretty decent, but it wanted to stay really rich. Anytime I try to lean it out, it almost sounded like it wanted to miss or something. It just didn't sound quite right. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna start off by verifying my fuel pressure. We have an adjustable one-to-one fuel pressure regulator from ievilenergy, and we just want to verify that everything's working as it should and that we have our base pressure set where it should be. So that's where we're going to start off. Here in a minute we'll have Dad turn the key. We'll check what the base pressure is with the engine off just to see where we're at. Then we'll fire it up, disconnect the vacuum line, and go through the whole process of setting it. We want it to be about 43.5 with the engine running and vacuum line off. Then when we hook up the vacuum line, it should pull it down a little bit. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we will also check with the compressed air, put a little pressure to it, and see if it goes up like it should. So before we even go starting this thing up, I want to verify that our regulator is doing what it should. So as you can see, I've got a little contraption here. This is the only device I have that can pull a vacuum besides our big vacuum pump, which is more than what we need here. So I've got a little vacuum gauge set up right there. Obviously it's been dropped a few times, it reads off, but I just want to see if it's going to pull a vacuum at all. So we've got our air ran to this. This is actually a brake bleeder kit, and we're gonna go ahead and pull the trigger here. And as you can see, it pulls it down into a vacuum. So we should be pretty good there. I'm gonna go ahead and get this set up. We'll test that on the regulator. I'm gonna go in the Honda and make it so that the pump just continually runs, and we'll use this to put a vacuum to it, make sure it's pulling our pressure down, and then we'll do the reverse of that. We'll regulate our air down to about 10 or 20 psi and use this little end right here, put it onto that, and we'll see if it goes up with pressure. So that's the basic function of a fuel pressure regulator. It should be a rising 1-to-1. With boost pressure, I can deal with it if it's a little bit off, as long as it's actually doing that and rising a little bit. And same with going into vacuum, it should drop when we apply vacuum. So let's get set up here. I will turn the pump on in the Honda software, and we'll go ahead and test this thing. Now that we're online, you've got to be online to do this, not Wi-Fi online, but connected to the car, like online with the ECU. So we'll go under the online tab, we'll go to test outputs, and then you get this drop down menu, and then over here we've got test fuel pump output / drain tank. So we can go ahead and click on that. And I don't know if you guys can hear it, but the fuel pump just clicked on. So we'll have Dad run this button real quick, and we'll go over to the fuel pressure regulator and do a function test. Alright, so it does seem to be pulling a vacuum. When we put the vacuum to it, it did drop a little bit. Now, how much it drops, I'm not positive of, because I don't know exactly what this little pump thing is putting out, and with a leak there and everything. So I'm gonna say that as far as vacuum goes, it is working just like it should. So let's go ahead and kill the pump again. And now we will put some pressure to it and see if it raises with pressure. All right guys, so we've got our little contraption here. It's just an air hose with a line going to it that fits onto our vacuum port for the fuel pressure regulator. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have Dad kick the pump on here in a second, and then I'll supply pressure, and we should see the needle go up this time. It went down with vacuum. Now we wanna make sure it raises with pressure. I was shooting for around 20 PSI with our adjustable regulator on the air compressor, but it may be off a little bit. So as long as we see a decent climb, we should be all right. As you guys can see, we've got, it's hard to see actually, but we've got roughly 50, 55. Let's go ahead and give it pressure. I'm gonna go ahead and up the pressure just a little bit and see what it does. Alright, so as far as our fuel pressure regulator test goes, I think we're good to go. I think it's doing exactly what it should. This ievilenergy fuel pressure regulator seems to be doing its job just fine, up past 80 PSI. So we're gonna go ahead and get disconnected here. We'll get ready to start the car up. I'm gonna let it get up to temp a little bit, and then we will try resetting our base pressure and seeing what it's sitting at. So I wanted to let you guys know that we are working with ievilenergy, and we've got a discount code for you guys that you can use at checkout. That code is B2B, and you can enter it right at checkout to save some money on your order. Once again, that code is B2B, and it'll save you a percentage on anything you order through ievilenergy, and we will have a link in the description of today's video so that you guys can go and check it out. So I went ahead and threw the tune back on it from last night because it seemed to cold start and run with that tune at least, but it was extremely rich. So we're gonna try to start taking some fuel out of it, but anytime I get it leaner than 12.0 or even 11.5, this thing starts running like crap, sounding like it's missing and everything else. So I'd really like to get it a little bit leaner than that. I don't mind if it's a little bit on the fat side if it keeps it smooth, but 12.0 to 11.5 just seems a little bit too rich, and we'll probably be fouling out plugs constantly. Now, we did have this thing running perfectly fine with the 550s. Was it perfect? No, but it ran pretty decent and drove really good. So I think we should be able to get these ones dialed in as long as we don't have any other issues. Now, I know the Hunter Tuned 1500cc injectors are definitely more of a budget style injector, so we could be running into some issues with that, but I don't want to knock the injector because I am by no means a tuner, and a good tuner may be able to come in here and get this thing running perfectly within 5 minutes. So I don't want to knock the injectors, but we did have it running decent with the 550s, and I'm hoping we can get it similar with these. So let's get it warmed up, we'll set our base pressure, and we'll just work from there. I went ahead and changed our post start to -60%, and then I added a little bit of fuel on cranking 13%. So let's go ahead and try the key again, see if this thing will start. Wow, breathe on that key and it fired up today. See if it'll idle for a second, and we will go ahead and try to set that base pressure. Not sure how well you guys can see it, but it looks like our base pressure is definitely higher than I thought. So we're gonna go ahead and bump that down a bit and see if we can't get this thing to idle better. So I've got that set down around 43, and I'm gonna go ahead and hook our vacuum line back up and see if it pulls it down a little bit more and helps clean it up. So I threw the vacuum line back on there. Not sure if you guys can see it, but that's got us down closer to like the 30, 32 mark. So I'm gonna go ahead and mess around with the tune now and see if we can't clean it up a little. So I don't know if you guys can see, but I keep just taking away 10%, 10%, 10%. We've got it up to about 11.5 right now. This thing is smoking pretty bad. It's super fat. But I'm gonna keep trying to take some fuel away from it and see if we can't get it to keep running decent. As you guys can see right now, it's surging pretty bad AFR wise. RPM's not terrible, but that's definitely surging a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a tiny bit back in it. I can deal with like 13.5 even, but I'd like it a little bit better than this. So as you guys seen, we went ahead and pulled a bunch of base fuel pressure out of this thing. And now looking back at it, I do remember adding some base pressure when we were maxing out our 550s, trying to get a little bit more headroom out of them. So we went ahead and got that dialed back down, and it definitely seemed to help. We were only able to idle at like 10.5 to 11.0 before. Now we've got it to a point where we can idle at about 12 to 12.5. So still far from perfect, but definitely better than it was. So we're gonna go ahead, fire this thing up. I made a couple little changes, and we're gonna take it for a ride and just see how it does. I've definitely got to ask some people that are much smarter than me when it comes to tuning some questions to try to figure this thing out and start trying to get it dialed in. So let's fire it up, take it for a little ride, and just go from there. Take this thing down the road and see what it does. Because it drives like you wouldn't even notice until you come to an idle, or if you're looking at the AFR gauge. If I wasn't looking at the AFR gauge, I think it was running great. Go ahead and start a little log real quick. Let's call it quits there. We got it to about 13.5, 13.7, even 14 at some points. It's definitely better than it was. Still oscillates a little bit, not a fan. Could be the injectors though. We might be able to get it a lot better once we're on E85 as well. So let's just rock with it and see what happens. So as you guys can see, we still have a long way to go before I'd even remotely consider this thing dialed in. Now we are making some progress. I've got it to a point where it will idle around 13.2 to 13.5 consistently, but it still oscillates a little bit, and it still almost sounds like it has a very slight miss to it. Now that could be something else, it could be normal, but that's what it sounds like to me. Now we are making progress with it, but it still has a long way to go. Hopefully by the next video, I'll have it figured out enough to be able to take this thing out and make some rips with it. Once again, I want to say a huge thank you to both subscribers that set these injectors in, especially with all the other goodies that were in the package with the 1000 cc's. I really appreciate you guys for looking out for the channel. Now, if you guys have any ideas or suggestions or things you think I should try or I'm doing wrong, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. I'm always open to constructive criticism, and I'm always down to learn something. So make sure to get in the comment section and let me know what you guys think. As always, I appreciate you for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and check us out on all of our other social media platforms: Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one. Bye.